And he's like, Dad, you got the shot? And I'm like, I don't think so. He's like, what do you mean? And then when we reviewed it, yeah, I missed the shot. Anyway, I miss shots. I mess up sometimes.
You got the shot. You got it right here.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Game Day Glare. I'm Lance, and I'm with my boy E. How you doing, E?
Always good. How about
Always
you?
Good? Yeah, pretty good, man. It's been busy. Hockey season's back, so I've been pretty busy lately, getting ready for the regular season, which is just around the corner, so that's exciting. And I'm excited about today's... Are we making playoffs? I don't know. We're not there yet. We're still in preseason, so I'm not going to throw out any predictions. But I am excited about today's episode because today's episode is all about our fans. It's all about people asking us questions either through our Instagram, our YouTube, our Spotify, or even your YouTube channel. So basically today's episode is us going through all the questions that people have asked, written in, commented, and hopefully by the end of this episode, we've answered your question.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm excited.
So the first question is, E, what is your real name? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. No,
that's it.
That's my real name.
All right. So first question. We'll start off. First question. E, what inspired you to be a sports videographer?
For me, it was because originally I started working in television, and I was very happy because that's what I studied. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a video editor. Back when video editor was a job and cameraman was another job. So yeah, that's what I was doing. I was happy, but then the thing was like the content of the TV shows that I was working on wasn't necessarily. They weren't TV shows that I would personally watch on TV. So there was, from that perspective, like it wasn't that exciting. And sure enough, one day, through knowing someone who was leaving at the Montreal Canadiens, and wanted me to replace him for 6 months or something, for a few months. I was freelancing here and there, so I was just, I'll take on that summer sort of gig. And yeah, once I started doing that, and I was also doing a lot of like concerts and stuff, I just realized, for me, it was sort of a revelation that you can actually edit content that you really enjoy, and just the rest was history, in the sense that, like, once I'm producing content that I would watch as a viewer, then my motivation is through the roof. I'm really into it. I really want to make it the best that it can be, because I want people who enjoy what I enjoy to really like it. And it just got me way more excited about work and about my creativity and all these different things. TV was way more of a formula. It's always the same formula. Like, you create it at the start, but then it's just always the same thing. And that was kind of boring for me. And so, yeah, so once I got into sports and I got really excited about that, it's just, I couldn't see myself do anything else than that, really. So I just pushed, even after the Canadiens, I tried to stay in sports, and it worked out. And yeah, I've been doing it ever since. What about you? Where did you start?
I started back in my early 20s. So I was at Concordia University in communications, and my friend worked for the Montreal Expos. He called me and said, "Hey, we're looking for a replacement cameraman. You interested?" So I said, "Definitely." Like, growing up playing sports my whole life, a chance to work for a pro sports team was a dream. So went for that interview, was hired as a part-time cameraman. By the time I got home, I was a full-time cameraman for that season. It was the 2002 season. So that's how I started, and kind of trickled from there. I went from there to the Canadiens, where I still am, and then do freelance sports videography also. But it all started back in 2002 with the Montreal Expos, and I've never looked back. And honestly, like, it was a dream come true to be able to work for a pro sports team, get to see players up close at such a young age. And it taught me a lot of things. It taught me how to be mature around players. It taught me how to realize that these guys are just regular people who have a different job than I do. Their job was to play baseball or hockey, but they're there to do their job. And I saw the professionalism of these athletes, and it kind of guided me along the way too, to be a pro when I was there. So yeah.
And
So,
you mentioned this freelance sports videography, which is a great
yeah,
segue to the next question. What do you
yes,
think is the the next question is, what essential gear do you need to get started in sports videography?
you need a camera. You need a camera. Now, we've gone through what kind of cameras you have on other episodes, and I'm just going to say to start, film with whatever you have and learn from there. Because when I was younger, that's how I got into video editing and filming. As my friend had a camera, and we used to make movies. We used to make these silly movies for fun, but it taught me a lot of things. It taught me how to do different angles. It taught me to anticipate what cuts I was going to make later on in post production, stuff like that. So the most essential thing is have a camera and start playing with it, start trying things, and it's the only way. It's the most logical way to evolve. And you?
No, I agree. I think if you're starting with a phone, for example, this is a great way to just. Obviously, you're not going to be touching much, exposure settings and focus and all these different things, but you can at least focus on getting the right shots, the right camera positions, the right composition in your shot, all these different things. And honestly, it's also more so about practicing your editing, because if you're filming all that content on your phone, then you can edit it and get better at editing and improve your editing skills. And but as soon as possible, if you're really into it, I would get just like a budget mirrorless camera, just so that you can again build experience with all these settings, whether it's the exposure, the white balance, the focus, all these different things. Once you understand, because these are all concepts, like once you understand how that works, you can handle any camera really. So the sooner you understand that, you know how it works, then first of all, you can get much better results out of a budget camera than a lot of people get out of a pro camera, because they don't know how to properly set the exposure. So half of their settings are just on auto, and they get pretty average results, or they don't really understand things like bit rate and color depth and all these different things. So they're not really using the maximum potential of their camera. So the sooner you start, the sooner you understand these things, the sooner you'll get great results. And obviously, if you start young, then you should have access to a lot of sports just by filming your friends, your teams, your school teams, all these different things. So, but yeah, I digress. In terms of like, what do you need? You just need a camera, really, because at that point, you don't really worried about capturing, great audio and things like that. And filming sports, you don't necessarily need lights unless you're going to go down the path of doing interviews and things like that. But really, all you need is a camera and then a zoom lens. I would just get like a for years I carried and used 18 to 200 mil, which is, it's not super cheap, but it's cheap enough that, and it does everything okay. Like, it does nothing great, but it does everything okay. So you can film outdoor sports, indoor sports, you can film anything. So get you an 18 to 200, get you a cheap budget camera, go nuts.
Well, you just answered two of our next questions with your
Nope,
question. No, but it's
I'm on
good.
a
It's good
roll.
because one of the questions you always get asked on your YouTube, which is the question we're going to ask, is how do you choose the right camera for
Hmm.
sports videography, and what are the best lenses used for capturing fast paced sports action? So
Yeah, well, I didn't really answer.
no, well, you started. You try and
Touched.
kind of travel down that road. So
Yeah.
okay, back to the camera then. So obviously a mirrorless camera, but I mean you have to realize if you're going after higher end clients, higher end sports, then you're not going to have a budget friendly camera. Most likely you're going to have to go up to
Mhm.
like an FX3, an A7 IV, something like that. For a lens, you're going to need a fast lens. You're going to want like a 2.8 or a 1.8. Your focal length will change, but I mean, you want something fast, and they're more expensive also.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also about expectations, because, like you said, depends what you're doing. Are you doing this professionally, or are you just trying to start and put your feet in the water, sort of thing? So, like, if you're starting, then my answer before uh, pretty much answers that. But yeah, like for example, the question that I get the most is, what's the best camera? And then that's such a broad question because it's like there's no such thing as a best camera for basketball or a best camera for football or even for sports. Like unless you're looking at camcorders and you want like the one that has the best lens and the most convenient and stuff. But like with mirrorless cameras, I mean, it's just about what you like. You can buy a cheap camera and be completely fulfilled with the results if you're filming your kids and you just want something that's doing the job, that's going to give you what you need for your memories and stuff. And but if you're going beyond that, and especially if you're comparing yourself to like high-end sports videographers on Instagram and you're looking at their videos and then you're looking at yours and you're like, oh, why mine aren't looking as good, then the camera and or the lens are probably the answer. But half the time it's just about actually knowing how to use your equipment. So there's my point is basically there's no point in buying a $5,000 camera if you don't understand what makes it better and how to use those features. And also if you're not willing to put in the time to use those features, because usually the more expensive the camera is, the higher the ceiling is in terms of image quality, but the more work there is to do to get there, and the more sort of the more you have to learn about the camera features and settings and all these different things. So depending on what you're doing, are you willing to put in that time what to learn, put in that time to work on your footage, to work on the settings and put everything in manual and monitor this all game and stuff? Or would you rather be with an easier to manage camera that's not going to get you the best results, but it's probably going to give you, for example, as a parent that wants to enjoy the game as well, it's probably going to give you a better experience because there's not that much to do and you can therefore enjoy the game as well. So yeah, it all depends on what you're after. And same thing with well, not same thing with lenses, because lenses are, it's not, there's not more work to do on a better lens, but in a way there is, because if it's a shallow depth of field, then the focus is going to be tricky. So yeah, do you want to go down that route where you might have to shoot in manual focus? Or yeah, some shots might look good, some might not. uh, so yeah,
I
expectations.
rather have I rather have a better lens than a better camera,
Hmm.
because I feel like I'm going to keep that lens longer. I can always adapt. Like, so say we have the Sony line or the E mounts. I know as long as Sony keeps that mount, I can use that lens on different cameras. So I would rather invest on a better lens than a better camera, because you can have the Sony EV10 compared to an FX3, say. You could do a lot of the similar stuff with the setting wise, but your glass or your lens is going to make a big difference. As long as you have your settings dialed in, yes, the more expensive camera helps, but the lens will help you a lot more than the more expensive camera.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, there's other factors, but yeah, the camera is a huge one because like you said, first of all, you buy it forever, unless you it wasn't that great to begin with, but also for light, which is I think the next question, having
Yeah.
a camera with um, a constant aperture helps a lot, because usually yeah it's a 2.8 or 4, and therefore lets in a bit more light, and you can probably get a better quality because you don't have to push the ISO as much. So on a budget camera that makes a big difference. So yeah, I agree with you. A better quality lens, and also better lens, better quality lens, will go a long way, especially if like I always like I often people ask me, should I go for APS-C lens or full frame lens if I've got an APS-C camera? And it's like, well, if your intention is to grow in this thing and just eventually get a better camera and stuff, then I would go full frame, because that way your lenses will last forever. But if you're just happy with your little kit and you don't really have the ambition to one day get a full frame camera, then go with APS-C. It's going to be much cheaper. So it's not about one being better. It's just about what's your situation.
Yeah, because not everyone's situation is different. Okay. Now, next question. We already kind of talked. Well, you brought it up, lighting. So, how do you handle lighting in different sports environments? Because that's always the hardest thing, right? Is setting up your white balance, making sure your colors are good. So how do you handle it?
Yeah, well, I try to stick to one color temperature, like unless I'm moving, going in different rooms or inside, outside, that sort of stuff. But I don't use auto white balance in terms of colors. I try to stick to one because then it's easier to manage. Okay, all that section was in. It can be color corrected the same way, and this other section can be color corrected the same way. Where if you're on auto, it's all over the place, and every shot has to be dealt with individually. But lighting wise as well, again, like having a faster lens gives you a bit more breathing room when it's dark. So that's always good. If you got a little bit of money, like if you can afford a $1,000 camera, for example, the ZV-10 Mark II has, it's not officially a dual base ISO, but the noise does reset at a second point, or depending on the picture profile. I know in S-Log 3, I think it's at 2500 ISO, I think. Um, if you want confirmation, you can always watch my review on it.
That's it. Go to my YouTube
But
channel for more info.
yeah, exactly. No spoilers on this podcast. But so yeah, having a dual base ISO is always good to deal with difficult lighting situations. Otherwise, if you're outdoors, variable NDs are definitely a must because otherwise, yeah, in the sun, if you're not on a variable ND, that means either your aperture is super high or your shutter speed. So being able to dial those into exactly what you want them to be, and then just deal with the variable ND to adjust the brightness is definitely the way to go, especially if you're in the stadium where some sections are in the shade, others are in the sun. It's always good to have like a quick fix for that you can play with manually. And well, actually, like cameras like the FX6 that have automatic NDs, it's probably even better. Like, to be honest, if there's one thing that I would like to have on auto, it's definitely the ND. But
For
I've never
sure.
tried it. Have
Are
you?
you talking about your stadium again, the one that you hate with all the different lighting? Is that your
No,
way of trying to bring that back into our show?
there was one in Australia actually that I would film a lot at, that had like I'd say after 2 p.m. The sun is slowly starting to go down. It was just like, yeah, half the stadium would be in the shade, and it was just so annoying.
So what I do when I have to change a lot of locations, my best friend is my gray card, and
Mm.
I'll use that for white balancing when I'm changing locations. And then I try to always remember too, especially if I go to the same arena a lot. Then I have my settings dialed in. I'll know that this arena here is 3200, this one's 56, this one's 4100, and you try and make a habit of remembering what your color temperatures are if you have the chance to go back to the same locations. So my gray card is my cheat. It only takes 2 seconds. You pop it out, pull out your camera, you know, put on pick your white balance, set it to the gray card, boom, it's done. Now, do I always have time to do that? No, 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 because sometimes you're running too much, you don't have time. Then I'll try and cheat by either being smart enough to know what the light temperature is. And if I don't, I've used auto before, auto white balance, but you need time to set up auto white balance too. You have to actually find something that you're going to reference. And then I use that point for my auto white balance, and then I'll lock it. That way, once it's locked, I know it's not changing. So for some reason in post, if I'm not happy with the white, I know that everything is locked into that one color temperature. So it's an easy adjustment. Now, I don't recommend it, but if you're stuck, it's a quick fix. And that's what today's about, right? Answering your questions, trying to show you what we do. So don't do what I do and just do what I say. Use your gray card, okay?
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, while you're in the settings, the camera settings, like what's the next question? What camera settings would you use for fast moving sports?
So this is going to be E's favorite answer of the day, okay? I'm going to go to 120 frames per second because E shoots everything at 120 all the time. So I think you have to go at the fastest frame rate as possible. Now, ideally, I would love to open up my iris to the widest it can, But in fast-paced sports, it's tough because sometimes your camera will lock on the wrong focus point, especially if you're using
Hmm.
automatic focus. I have actually started trying to shoot more manual focus when I open up all the way to kind of control a little bit more. But you're dealing with a lot. Like you're following it. I'm zooming out. Sometimes I'm zooming in, and I'm also fiddling with the focus. So I don't recommend it.
When you're shooting manual, do you use like peaking or something, a false color to help you, or you just go?
No, I use my peaking actually. I actually use my peaking. And yeah, I use red. You could use red or blue, and then I'll just adjust it like that. Or I'll do what we've spoken about plenty times on the show is instead of having it open at f.28, I'll put it to f4, where it's not actually as shallow, but it stays in focus a lot better, and I'll grab that subject a lot better. So that's my workaround. But I mean, when you're fast paced sports, I'll also boost my shutter a bit too. Like I'll go above the 180-degree rule because sometimes I'll get asked for stills, or sometimes when I do slow motion, I want it really crisp. So I'll almost double that, and that's how I shoot fast. You?
Do you crank the shutter speed as well if you're filming in like 24 or 30 frames, or do you keep it at 180?
So in 24, no, I usually keep it at the 180 rule because I feel like if I'm shooting at 24, I want that motion blur.
Oh, I agree.
One time I did leave it though. Like I had everything on manual settings. So like usually you know how you have 1, 2, 3 and you have it programmed. I did a quick interview fast that wasn't supposed to happen, kind of like a stand up. And I did it in 24 and I had the shutter cranked and it was okay, but it looks off. It just looks too sharp. Like you could tell that something's off with it. The interview was fine. No one really noticed, but I noticed. So that was the only time I ever had the shutter cranked more in 24. But usually I don't. There's no need.
No,
Yeah,
I agree with everything you said.
it's about
The other
time.
thing I'd say,
31 podcasts later, he agrees with
yeah,
what I say.
exactly. No, I was just gonna say. Also, and as far as like recording formats and settings and stuff, like always go with the highest, highest bit rate. If 10 bits available, I'll go for that. And but again, like a lot of people, they see, for let's say like I do a video about the FX30 or the Sony ZV-10 Mark II, and they look at the footage and they're like, oh yeah, this looks great, this is what I want. Then they shoot in 10 bit with the highest bit rate, and then 60p. And by the way, I do use 120 a lot, but if it is like too dark of an environment, or if my camera has a huge crop in 120 and that feels like it's unnecessary, or it's stopping me from having good shots, I will go down to 60. But yeah, so like people do that. They get this camera, they're all excited about what it can do, but then it's like my computer can't read the files. My card fills up in less than half a game, and they realize that going to that extent of quality means buying new cards, potentially buying a new computer, or working with proxies. But working with proxies, depending on how fast of a turnaround you're trying to do, can be annoying. And so then they realize after the fact that they need all these new things that cost almost just as much in the end as the actual camera, if not more, if you need a computer. So then they either film in 8-bit and lesser quality, therefore sort of just completely uh there's no point basically in buying that high-end camera if you're not using its best quality features, which is the reason why you bought it in the first place. Or then they end up spending like thousands of dollars more than they wanted to spend. So yeah, there is things to consider when you're trying to go for the higher settings, the higher quality cameras and equipment. So yeah.
All right. So next question: how do you frame and compose shots during live sports events?
Oh, that one's for you.
It's for me. I'm
You're the
shooting wide
live
nowadays.
sports guy.
I'm shooting wide
That's what
nowadays.
everybody calls you, isn't it? Hey, live sports guy.
everybody crops everything now for TikTok and Instagram
Mm,
Reels and stuff. So I feel like you really have to know where your footage is going. You know, and who calls me live sports guy? Who calls me that? Is that in the
I do.
comments? Oh, you do. Oh, okay, perfect. As long as it's not people who listen to the show, then I'm okay. If it's just you, I can ignore it. But you have to know where your material is going to end up. I feel so. If I'm filming for broadcast, I'm not worried about that. They'll deal with what are the highlights any way they want after. If I'm dealing for a client and they're saying like, "Hey, I want this on my socials," then I'm going to have to frame stuff a lot wider because I know I'm going in. I'm going to zoom in. Now, I have filmed vertically before, but being trained for so long filming horizontally, it's tough. Like I struggle with it. I find it very, very hard to follow a game vertically. So I don't enjoy it. I will do it for, quick little videos, or if I have to do a talking head video, something like that, that's just going on socials, I'll do it then. But to actually capture a sport, it's much easier to do it horizontal because this way I can
Yeah,
see everything that's happening on the court. Yes, if I'm too close, I'll keyframe and I'll figure a way around it. It just takes a little bit of extra work, but knowing where your final product is going to go, that's how I decide how I'm going to frame it and compose that image.
it's good. Great answer. I have nothing to add because I don't film. Well, I mean, I
No? Okay, so
film
I'll ask you the
live
next question.
sports, but like I don't. I was looking at it more from a broadcast perspective. Like that's
Oh,
maybe
okay.
I misunderstood the question. I agree with everything you said. Again, see,
Okay, so
twice in a row.
here's one. How do you choose the right angle to capture the most dynamic moments?
How do you choose the right angle? That's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, you just need to know the sport because if you know the sport, then you know what's most likely about to happen, and then you can put yourself in a position to capture that moment. Like for example, in a football game, I you kind of have an idea where when a long pass might like if the one team's starting to lose by a few touchdowns, uh, long bombs are going to come are going to be a bit more are happening a bit more. So therefore, you want to be a bit further back, way more than you were earlier in the game, for example. Or to just simply like getting closer to the red zone, then you want to go behind the end zone to capture that touchdown. Like it's just knowing, and if a team obviously relies heavily on their running back, then you sort of keep it tight at the start of the shot, and that way you can capture that run straight from the start. Like just little things like that. Um, but yeah, it's otherwise there's classics like it's just trying to be in front of the play as much as possible so you can see the players' faces as much as you can. Filming from a low angle, these are all things that you should do in any sport. But yeah, let's say the main thing is just to know the sport, to understand the sport, to understand where the players are positioned and where they're most likely to go to make different plays and to be ready for that moment. What would you say?
I would say knowing the sport definitely helps. When you know where the action is going to go, you kind of anticipate it, how the play is going to go. It allows you to cheat, right? Because you're not always going to get the players aren't always going to do produce the shot you're looking for, but you put yourself in the right angle for success if you know where the play should be going. So so like look at basketball, right? If you're underneath the hoop and you're angled up, you got a good chance to get good shots, a dunk, stuff like that. Like you in that position, you're set up for success. So every sport has certain spots where you have a higher percentage of success rate. So put yourself in those spots first, get those shots, and then you can maybe move and try something more creative.
And you can even like sometimes, especially a sport like basketball, where there's going to be, let's say you've got a 3 point shooter, you can get him from the sideline and see him sort of, shoot, and then you can get him shooting again from the baseline, so they can use those two shots into one cool shot that starts with like a focus on him, sort of doing his shooting motion, and then it cuts to the ball sort of coming towards the basket that you're capturing from the baseline. Two different shots, but in the video it's just one awesome shot.
I do that a lot in hockey. I put a GoPro behind the net on the glass, and then I'll be on the side filming the guys. So for goals, right, when a guy shoots or beats the goalie, well, then I can quick cut to the back of the net. as it's going
Mm.
in, and it makes it a little more dynamic. You have the same action but with two angles, right? So that's exactly the same thing you were explaining in basketball.
And with basketball, you can actually save a bit of time because you can skip probably a shot that takes maybe like a second and a half to actually get to the rim. Maybe you can cut half a second out of it, no one notices, and just speeds up the edit. You know what I
Process.
mean?
All right. So next up, this is something that people struggle with. Well, some of our listeners have struggled with, and even some of your YouTube viewers, is what techniques do you use to capture slow motion in sports? Now, for some reason, people don't always get this, that it depends on your frame rate, what you're shooting in camera, and depends on your frame rate on your timeline. People have like, yes, S and Q will shoot in slow motion,
Yeah.
but you have to adjust accordingly. So what you want is a say a 24 frame timeline, and then if you shoot at 60 or 120, you could slow that down to 40% or 20%. That is the easiest way to shoot slow motion. Do you ever recommend any other ways to shoot slow motion?
No, well, like you said, sometimes you can use a SNQ just because it's all the slow motion is going to be produced in camera, and some people say that that's how you get the highest quality because it's done. You know, you get an actual 24 frames per second clip that just happens to be playing in slow motion. To be honest, you'd be showing someone the slowed down version done the way you mentioned and the SNQ version, and no one would see the difference. So it doesn't really matter. But some cameras, mostly older cameras, you sort of have to go to SNQ to get 60 or 100 more 120 sometimes. But that's more older models. So yeah, I do it the exact same way that you mentioned. I think like what some people don't understand sometimes is that they assume that like just by shooting they're confused. They think that like if they're shooting in 60 or 120, their footage is automatically slowed down, and they're like, oh, what's going to happen if I want to play it at full speed? Do I have to put it in a 120 frames per second timeline? And they're like, no, you can put whatever frame rate you want in your 24 frames per second timeline, and it's going to be fine. It's just giving you the option of slowing it down in post if you choose to do so, but it's not automatically done. So that's the confusion. And then sometimes people they do shoot in 60 thinking, all right, now I've got slow motion footage, but then they put it in a 60 FPS sequence, and they act as if they can slow it down and it's not an issue, and they don't understand why their footage doesn't look as crisp as other people who slow down their footage, and that's why, because if you put 60 in 60 and you slow it down, you're showing only half the amount of frame that sequence needs to look uh, normal and fluid. So yeah, it's just a lot of math. It's not that complicated, but you just got to understand the math between the number of frames in the footage and in the sequence. I've got videos about that too.
The easiest way to make that mistake is when, say, if you're using Adobe Premiere and you grab your 60 frame clip and you drag it on your timeline and it says, do you want to match the frame rate, your sequence and the clip? You just say no and you keep it at 24 and you're fine. But a lot of people just hit yes and go on, and then they don't understand why they can't slow it down. And it's just a beginner mistake, but as you understand more and more why you're shooting at these higher frame rates, it all makes sense.
No, I agree. Because a lot of people assume that more frames means more quality, which is not necessarily the case.
No, exactly. All right. Now, next one. What is your go-to editing software tool for sports videography? It's CapCut, eh? I know you just use CapCut 100%.
Exactly. No, for me it's Chat GPT. I just no,
Midjourney?
no. Well, it's not for me. It's not. It's not a sports thing. It's just an editing thing. Like for me, it's Premiere Pro, but it's just because that's what I've been using for I don't know how many years at this point. So I'm really fast on it. Well, in comparison to other platforms. So that's just what I go to because I don't want to be slow. So I just go back to it. And but it is better than most budget options for sure. Is it better than DaVinci or Final Cut, things like that? That's probably debatable. Honestly, I don't know the others well enough to make a statement that Premiere Pro is definitely way better. But but it is better than the budget options because it's just easier to manage every little detail. You know, you can change everything you want to change. Where like sort of the Filmoras and CapCut and all that, they're limited into like little thing. When you get into the details, and if you want to key something, or like actually Filmora is not that bad, but they basically they all have certain things that they're really good at, and there's certain things that they really suck at. Where Premiere Pro, you can pretty much do anything. It's not cheap though.
So I've dabbled in all of them. I've used Final Cut. Well, we used to use Final Cut, the old original one,
Yeah,
7 a long
Final Cut
time ago.
7. Yeah.
Then I used Final Cut X, the new Final Cut, Premiere Pro. I use DaVinci, and I've lately been trying to use CapCut just to kind of see. I like the cool effects. Okay, guys. Sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
want to see the cool effects without putting all the work into it. It's actually really easy for rotoscoping. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm trying that. Now, edit, once you understand the concept of editing, it doesn't really matter what software you're using. It's what software are you more efficient in? Because every software for editing videos has an in, an out, an export. They all have the same stuff. They're just in different places, and it's how you use them. So back in the day, there was always issues with certain softwares about stability. And I feel like right now, at least for me, my projects are stable in Premiere Pro. So I have no problem. 90% of my work is done in Premiere Pro. I'll use DaVinci sometimes for coloring, and just because sometimes clients want you to use DaVinci because it's the cool editing software right now, where Premiere is just the standard, DaVinci is the cool hip one. So that's why I use it. But my advice is use whatever software you're comfortable with and can get your project done. Because I guarantee you, if you had a project and you had this new software and you had to use it, you would figure out a way to get your project done in that software if you already have the basics of editing.
Yeah. Well, like speaking of projects, that's one thing that like with Premiere Pro, I can have as many sequences. I can import a project in my project. I can manage like big scale stuff with CapCut, Filmora, Power Director, like all these budget ones. A sequence is a project. So if I'm trying to do anything big, I have to manage. Like, let's say I need 5 or 6 different sequences within the same sort of project in terms of like that documentary that I'm working on, or that game, or whatever the thing is. They have to be like physically separate projects that I gotta close one to open the other, and then if I when I create a new one, I gotta re-import everything. So everything's in like it's just yeah, it's not those things are not made for bigger professional projects. Did I say
All right.
projects?
Yeah, you said project. All right. So now you got a project lined up, right? But you got a tight deadline. So the question is, how do you handle post production when working with a tight deadline? What's your trick to kind of gain some speed to kind of get that project out there as fast as you possibly can?
Good example would be players walking in into the arena before a game, and you need to quickly edit like a 45-second video of all the cool shots of guys walking in slow motion, and then just edit it to music, and then send it ASAP before the game starts. For that, I would create my project in advance, my sequence in the right size. I already picked my music. I already laid it down. 45 seconds, ready to go. And then I go shoot. Probably I don't necessarily have to shoot because I was gonna say I would pick Essenatone or something that I don't have to color grade too much. But at the same time, if you expose properly in S-Log 3, you just have to put a LUT, and you're pretty much at the same place. So it's fine. Unless you've got a slower computer and you want to minimize the render time, the exporting time, then yeah, I would stay away from adding any unnecessary layers. But otherwise, yeah, it's just shoot. Well, in that context, doesn't really make sense. But if it was for a game, let's say you want to do a quick recap soup that you want to get out as quickly as possible after the game, I was going to say shoot to edit. So don't overshoot. Don't shoot stuff that you won't need. Like don't overshoot the warm up. Don't shoot when the game's not on. If you're filming crowd shots, be specific, like get like zoom in onto a fan that's doing something cool, but don't just like do a million random crowd shots that aren't going anywhere. Same thing with sport. Maybe during the game you might want to delete some stuff. Well, I've never done that, to be honest, but just keep it simple so that you don't have a million shots to go through. Um, Identify your good shots while filming. Every time you film something good, then film the ground or put your hand in front of the lens, so that way when you're opening all your clips, you can see all the good ones are marked, because the clip after that is a black frame or a shot of the ground. Um, so yeah, just simplify things, make them as convenient as possible, be prepared, and that's it. What about you?
So I'll handle it a little differently. I'll talk about say a project you have a couple days to do, but it's a bigger project, so you have still have a tight deadline. Okay. For me, the way that I save time the most is when my clips are organized. So I'll make different sequences and I'll put like close up clips or certain player clips or certain plays on a certain timeline. And then when it's time for my edit, I could just go back and pick those clips fast and throw them on my timeline. So I'll spend more work going through the clips and getting my project organized than it will take me to edit it, because I've already done the pre-work ahead of time by labeling stuff and organizing that. So that's how I do it to save time, because there's nothing worse than you're looking at a clip and you're throwing a timeline. You're looking at a clip, you're throwing it on your timeline. You're editing timeline. And then later on, you got to go back and move everything. So I try to edit as I'm going, and then I'll do like a rough edit. I'll come back and I'll tidy everything up and then check it, and I'll get one more pass through it, and I'm usually pretty good. But I've already put in all that work organizing the footage, and that's where you save the time, because I know I have the best shots ready to go and on my timeline. So that's how I would do it for a bigger project.
So
Now, obviously, what
do
you're
you identify all your clips, or how do you do that
no, I'll
when you say
identify the
organizing?
timelines. Like
Okay.
say I'll put like close ups or entrances or pre warm up, first period, second period, kind of things like that. I'll have, depending on the project, but I'll have little sequences so that I can go in that sequence and grab what I need, because I already know I've already put all the best stuff there. And for me, that really speeds it up. It helps me with the final edit to get through it faster.
Well, I almost want to skip the next question and stick with the same type of thing. Like,
Sure, sure.
what happens if it's like a multicam scenario? How do you identify your clips? How do you make that sort of a how do you organize it, basically?
So what I would do is I'd put the two clips back to back. The two, like I'll put the two clips back to back on one of my working timelines. I'll call it my working timeline. And then when I bring them back into my final sequence, I'll make sure that I adjust exactly where I want that cut to be. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. And honestly, I've been looking. I don't think we're going to be able to get through all the questions today, so we might have to do a one of two in this. So don't
Yeah.
worry. This will probably be a one of two, because we're only like halfway, so we still have quite a bit of questions. So no stress about if we go over
Interesting.
that. We can always do a part two of answering people's questions, and you guys can always add more questions to it. I like organizing my footage because then I know I've seen everything. I'd rather spend more time on that, because sometimes if you're going too fast, you could miss a great shot. This way, I know I didn't miss any shots.
Especially if you didn't shoot it yourself.
Yeah, when you shoot it, you have the advantage, right? You're remembering what's going on. But there's times where I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or what, where I feel like I didn't shoot very good that day. And then you look at your footage after and you're like, wow, all right, that's a good shot. I'm good. Or you think you missed the shot. Because I do have a confession. I missed a great shot the other day. And my son was pissed at me. So since I broke one of my GoPros,
It's
I
like,
didn't
Dad,
have it
I'm the goalie. I don't move that much. How can you miss
exactly.
it?
So I had one GoPro for all the goals, and there was a third period, so they switched sides. So the other, I didn't have a GoPro on his side. I was standing there. He made this incredible save with a minute 30 left in the game to save the game. Right on the goal line, he dove. But I was too excited being a dad, where I was like, yeah, and I jumped, and my footage is just like, you just see him diving, and then you don't see anything else. And he's like, Dad, you got the shot? And I'm like, I don't think so. He's like, what do you mean? And then when we reviewed it, yeah, I missed the shot. And then he's like, yeah, but you have the GoPro. I'm like, the GoPro was at the other end. So I had to take the broadcast feed, which wasn't that good because it's pretty far. So
uh,
anyway, I miss shots. I mess up
All right, you,
sometimes.
you got the shot. You got it right here.
That's it. That's it. Anyway,
That's
a
all
little
that
off
matters.
topic, but yeah,
You know,
you miss
those
stuff.
memories.
That's it. That's it. You know what? I would have rather. This is what I tell him. I'd rather be your dad in that moment and watch it than have filmed it. It's a lie.
Exactly.
Sometimes we lie to our kids. I much would have rather see it later on and have it perfect. I would have shared that highlight, but I missed it. So I just make myself feel better and say that I'd rather just see it live. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
All right. So we got time for a couple more questions before we wrap
Well,
this up.
how do you ensure you capture key moments during fast moving sports? Well, that's kind of similar to a previous question, though.
I mean, I guess the difference is to make sure you capture it is just what the example that I shared
Mm,
is have
true.
multiple cameras. Have another camera because you will miss stuff. Even look when Pete was on our show from MLB, he said, you miss stuff all the time because you're maybe focusing on something else. You're doing a close up and this great play happens or you're trying that. So having a backup camera or a different angle of an area is a way to ensure that you capture almost everything. Unless you're me and you break your GoPro and then you still miss the shot. Okay.
That's true. But or you just, film games where you don't have any relatives or friends or you're not as emotionally involved. Or also, like, to be honest, like a real actual advice, well, not that yours weren't real, but mine was, but is to film wider as well, because like if you're always trying to be like super tight because it looks awesome in camera, but you're probably, the risks of missing the shots are way higher, first of all, and sometimes something might happen just out of frame that you'll miss, and having the bigger picture, you'll be more stable, you'll capture more stuff, you're most likely to get the shot, and you can always punch in post if necessary, if even if it means losing quality. You'd much rather have the shot in slightly less quality than not have it at all. So yeah, shooting wider is always a good way, especially for beginners who are not, super comfortable filming handheld or following fast pace action. You can say smart stuff too
Yeah, you're smart. You're
sometimes.
smart. Now this
So I
one
got the
is
glasses.
so this next question, okay? It's for film outside. What's your strategy for shooting sports in different types of weather?
Oh, good question. Obviously, raincoat is always helpful. Personally, I've never had issues with a camera because of rain or humidity or anything like that, but I know it can happen, and it's one of those things where it's like, being sick. You always, oh, it never happens to me, and never happens to me until it does, and then it sucks. So it's sort of the same thing. Like a rain issue related issues rarely happen until they do, and then you're miserable. So yeah, that's one thing for the rain. The cold can also be an issue if you live in Canada, and it can be. I, I don't really film outdoor during the winter much, but it's mostly, what can be annoying though is going back and forth, like from outside to inside. Your lens will definitely fog up, or not even just outside to inside, just like a cold room, like hockey. I'm assuming it must happen to you sometimes, like just going from a locker room, from the ice to the locker room, it might fog up in the locker room because the lens, the glass needs time to adjust to the ambient temperature. So carry a cloth basically that you can use to quickly wipe your lens and go. That happened to me actually when we filmed in Calgary at the outdoors game many years ago. It's fogging up during the scrums. I was like, this is not going well.
It happens to me a lot in the summer when I'm filming hockey camps.
Okay.
Because there's like, well, one group's on the ice, one group's doing off ice training, so you try and do a bit of both. And the second you switch temperatures, yeah, your lens is fogged up, your LCD screen fogged up, all your viewfinders, everything. So you got to wipe it constantly, and then you start planning. Okay, you know what? I'm going to stay on this side a little bit longer and get some extra shots, so I don't have to go back and forth.
Uh,
Or you try and plan days where like today I'm just going to film ice, tomorrow I'll film the off ice stuff, and like so there's workarounds outside. I'm doing everything possible to keep my gear dry. I don't care if I get wet, but yeah, you want like a little rain sleeve for your lens or your body. You got to make sure that you don't get anything wet. Because honestly, yes, these cameras have a little bit of water seal, but you don't want to chance it. And that's where I think like action cams come in really, really handy in tight in bad weather. If you're filming for highlights and stuff like that, you don't have to really worry about them getting wet or rained on. So you still have to wipe the lens. So I know some people that put like this Rain-X on the lens where the water never drips on it.
Okay.
And yeah, it works. It works pretty good. But on action cams, I don't suggest putting it on your, mirrorless
Yeah.
$2,000 lens. But for an action cam, the Rain-X works pretty good. It keeps the water off of it. You get a pretty clear shot, and this way you're not worried about ruining gear. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, because what's annoying as well filming in the rain is that at some point you don't really know, like you're seeing all these you're seeing all this water on your monitor. Like, is this on the lens? Is it on my screen? Is it like you don't know how bad your shot is because there's water everywhere basically. So it gets confusing, and it gets really hard to know if you're in focus or not as well. Um, Otherwise, what's the next question?
What's your process for capturing behind the scenes footage of athletes and teams?
To me, I liked very much so to be like a fly on the wall. Basically, I don't want to get involved. I don't want the players to be talking to me. So, like, if they would like to talk to the camera from time to time, and they're funny guys and they have something smart ass to say, that's fine. But otherwise, I'd much rather be sort of not unnoticed, and then they're sort of being themselves and interacting with each other, and that way, when people watch the video, it kind of feels like they're in the room with them, and they're just sort of sitting in that locker room and just taking it all in. That's what I'm going for.
So when I'm doing behind the scenes, it's the player's room. It's not my room. So yeah, I'm staying out of the way. I'm just there to capture as if I'm not there. So I don't interact with them. I'll talk to them after the shoot, before the shoot. But guys have their superstitions, guys have their routines, and you're just there to capture that. So just stay out of the way, get what you can get. Don't get in anyone's way. Make sure you don't step on logos or stuff like that. Don't draw any attention to yourself. Just get in and out. And like you said, be a fly on the wall, do what you got to do and move on. There's plenty of time to talk before and after these things are done, but I try and respect it's their workspace. Like I'm working, I'm doing my stuff and they're letting me do it. Well, I got to let them do the same stuff so I don't interact. I give a quick little head nod and let's just get this over with and go. Now, there is a point where you're trying to be creative and it's hard when behind the scenes if you're in the locker room because you want to go closer and you want to get some close-up details and stuff like that. So I'll try and get there early when no one's there and I'll grab all those shots then, like, of say at hockey, helmets, gloves, sticks, nameplates, all that stuff. Because you can easily cut with that and you don't know if the guys are in the room or not. So get there early, get all your B-roll shots without the players. And then when the players come in, get those player shots. And then it gives you more variety to cut with after.
I like it. So now I think the next question could be our last, because I think it's a good one. Well, the actual question is, what's the most challenging sport to film and why? So I would ask you that exact question, but also, is there a sport that you've never filmed and that you might be scared of filming for whatever reason? Like, is there a sport that scares you as a videographer?
No, I don't think there's a sport that scares me, but I feel like golf is really hard to film. Okay. Now I have filmed an LPGA tour event before.
Okay.
And basically for broadcast, and what we did is you reverse the colors on your monitor at the time. They were black and white monitors. So the sky was black instead of white, and the sky was black, and you follow the white ball,
Yeah, wouldn't the ball be black as well?
Oh, maybe it's the opposite. Yes, sorry. I think no. I remember doing something on my screen where basically I was able to track the ball.
Yeah, I assume you would have like a black and white monitor and then
Yeah, it was a black and white. So yeah,
like,
that's it. I made the sky white and the ball black in the monitor to follow it. And that was tough. That was tough. That was for broadcast. So I'm in one spot and I had like I don't know, the same hole. I was just stuck on a hole. So I had 20 times, 30 times to practice this shot over and over again because I'm just following the guy from the tee box over. But if I was doing a personal video following golf, I think would be really, really hard because there's a lot of distance to travel. Like the guy hits, then you got to walk down the hole. You want to get a second shot. You want to try and find something creative for putting. Like I feel like it's pretty hard to, first of all, to make it look fast paced because golf isn't a fast paced sport. But to get those different angles, you got to mic guys up. So I feel like that's a really challenging sport to film. Now, it doesn't scare me. I would accept the challenge.
I ain't scared.
It, yeah. And the only other the sport that I haven't filmed, well, I filmed the sport, pro football, but I've never filmed an NFL game or for the NFL. So that's something that I'm missing from my bucket list, and it's definitely something that I will try to do before I'm done with my sports videography career. Because honestly, like the NFL is so cool. There's so many great video shots that come out of every week, every game, and I'd like to experience that. So that's something that I want to add to my list and add it to my resume. And why not go see a game?
Yeah. Or maybe one day though we'll get. They always do one of those early season games abroad. Maybe one will come to Montreal.
Maybe, I hope so. What about you? What sports haven't you done, or are you afraid to do, or you think would be challenging?
Well, definitely the first time I filmed, not the NFL, but just like American football. Even though it wasn't very high level, it was in Australia, and it was, I don't know what level it was, but nothing too crazy. But the first time, just trying to follow passes and stuff, there's definitely an adjustment. Like when you're used to basketball and rugby and all these all these sports where following the ball is not that hard. It wasn't easy the first at least the first half, and if I'm honest, the first game. But otherwise, the most difficult one I ever shot, I think boxing, funny enough, was challenging because there's like a pocket on one side of the ring where all the videographers, photographers are. So we're all like elbow to elbow. I'm talking obviously like professional sort of boxing. And so, yeah, we're all sort of squeezed in together, trying to get the same shot and trying to, push towards that middle spot. That's the best spot. And at the same time, there's the ropes. So you're trying to be in an angle where you're avoiding the ropes as much as possible and getting the faces and stuff. So it was hard to be creative. Like you couldn't move around. You always had that one shot, and there's ropes in the way, so that shot is also very limited. And it's so from that perspective, it was hard to make it interesting unless you got several cameras, like maybe one's more further back with a wide shot of the ring, maybe a bit elevated, so those ropes are not in the way. But as a one man band, it was actually quite hard. Sports I've never tried golf, and that was going to be one that I was going to mention as well. Like I would assume that following the ball at golf would be extremely difficult, and otherwise, I don't know. I think like swimming as well. If you're not that it would be hard to follow the swimmer, but just follow a swimmer in an angle. That's because I'm assuming, like, let's say I've got a gimbal and I'm just walking up and down. That's great, but that angle is not, it's not cute. Like you want to be at water level, like that camera at the Olympics, that just like that robotic camera. That's awesome. Like you want that sort of perspective, or maybe front on, things like that. But if you were just like one videographer with a mirrorless camera, I think it would be hard to film swimming from a perspective that's visually fun to watch.
You have to find ways to get different angles.
Hmm.
I want to touch back on your boxing because when you were talking about boxing, so I did boxing for broadcast, and it was a
Nice.
title fight on HBO, and I thought this
Okay.
was going to be so fun. So I'm in the corner, and every time they came to my corner and started punching, I would just get sweat on my face, on my lens, to the point where I'd have to turn around. A guy would be there to wipe my lens, and I'd go back.
Nice.
It was disgusting. Like I left there, and I just wanted to take a shower, and like
Did you get blood or not?
no blood, but just sweat. And now they have the robotic cameras there and stuff like that. But at the time we were handheld, and man, it was disgusting. And it was an amazing knockout in that fight, but I did not care. I was just so happy to get out of there. I showered at the Bell Center that night because I could not go home like that. Like the sweat that comes off these guys, especially when they're hitting, I never realized. It was the first time that I filmed boxing and like that in that position. So I had no clue for what I was into. And then the next time I was asked, I was like, oh, is there any other camera positions that I could take? Because I knew what I was getting myself into. So boxing's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, because those rope are thick as well. It's not like MMA where it's a cage, and it is annoying too because the cage is in the way. Obviously, a bit like a hockey. I assume sometimes you would have like a protective netting for the crowd if you're filming from the stands that would get in the way, or baseball as well. Like this, but but at least if you're sort of close enough to it and you can focus behind it, it kind of disappears. But those ropes at boxing, like they're not going anywhere. Like
Yeah, especially from that lower level. Like I
yeah,
was just standing in the corner where the ropes are. So, my head is above the rope. So when they're punching, it
yeah,
just, that sweat's just flying and hitting me all
yeah.
over the face. So, well, no, thank you. No, no, no more boxing for filming boxing from that angle
Yeah.
for me.
But I remember doing like an MMA event in Melbourne, Australia, and it was like a local, well, it was Australian. It was the highest level that you could go that was just like Australia wide. And but it's just in terms of like security and rules and all these different things, like there was an actual broadcast, but it was lawless. Like there was no security. Like, like normally you'd have like there's a jib, for example. There'd be like cones and stuff or ropes around it, and there'd be a section that you just can't walk and because it's dangerous and insurance and all these things. There was a jib, and there'd be like drunk people like underneath the jib, and it was just like a mess. So but for a videographer that's trying to do like a cool video, it was ideal because I could walk in and out of the back room where the fighters were, and no like credentials, nothing. And I was just filming whatever. And then I could walk around the cage, film all the different angles that I wanted. So when the guy is like doing a ground and pound and in one corner, I would just get in there, get that shot from up close, and then move somewhere else. My only concern really was just making sure I'm not blocking the same people behind me for too long, because you can imagine the type of crowd that's at an event
Yeah.
like that. I don't want to piss anyone off, especially that they're all way drunker than I am and on other stuff as well. And yeah, I don't want to start that type of conversation. But other than that, yeah, it was really cool.
Because when you film like UFC, right, everybody's kind of in the same boat. Everyone's at the same level. Everyone has pretty much the same angle. You kind of go around the cage where you can. You have those areas where you can go. And then if you're lucky, if you're working with UFC, they'll give you some broadcast footage too. So you can kind of mix and match. But when you're shooting on your own, it's tough to be creative. It's tough to get those angles. And every sport's challenging. So you have to kind of figure out, okay, what's my shot going to look like? How am I going to keep this interesting? And that's the hardest part about being a sports videographer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially when there's a cage or a ring in the way.
Or sweat all over you, whatever. All right. So we're going to come back then to the rest of these questions. So we'll have to do a part 2,
And
which
maybe
is
you can write comments and add more to the list.
Yeah. So if there's anything else you guys want to add or stuff, E will be happy to answer all your questions, because the next show I'm just going to sit here and just fire them off at him. But no, we still got at least another 15, 20 questions. So we'll do a part 2 of of answer. That's it. Yeah, wear the glasses again, E, so our viewers know that it's a serious topic.
Exactly.
But I guess that's it for this episode of Game Day Glare. I hope we answered your questions. I hope what we answered so far has helped. And yeah, write us some more questions, and we'll get on them and answer them.
See ya.
See ya.